The Undercover Economist Strikes Back by Tim Harford. Picture this: London, 1949. Christmas is just around the corner. Inside the prestigious London School of Economics, a room full of the world's brightest economic minds has gathered for what they think will be just another seminar. But today, something unusual is about to happen. The speaker isn't some celebrated professor with a string of accomplishments. He's a shy middle-aged student from New Zealand who recently failed to get his sociology degree. Oh, and he's wheeled in a machine. This thing is extraordinary. 7 feet tall, made of clear plastic tanks, pipes, and sluice gates, all filled with water dyed a vibrant, shocking pink. It looks like something a mad scientist might build if they were designing an aquarium for an alien species. The Nobel Prize-winning professors scattered around the room are staring. Some are whispering. A few are actually laughing. What could this bizarre contraption possibly have to do with economics? The shy New Zealander, Bill Phillips, steps forward. There's a cigarette perpetually near his lips. He fiddles with a pump at the back, salvaged from a World War II bomber, mind you, and with a screech that sounds like an angry kitchen blender, the pink water begins to flow. It moves from tank to tank, through dams and gates, representing the flow of money through an entire country's economy. Within 5 minutes, the laughter dies. It's replaced by stunned silence, then an electric buzz of astonishment. These brilliant minds are witnessing something unprecedented, the world's first-ever computer model of an economy. Bill Phillips, the guy who couldn't pass sociology, had built a machine that could solve complex equations in minutes, equations that would take a room full of mathematicians weeks to crack. He'd literally built the economy in a box. This isn't just a quirky footnote in history. It's the foundation of a powerful idea. The economy isn't some mystical, unknowable force of nature. It's a machine. Sure, it's complex, but it's still a machine. And like any machine, it can break down. But here's the hopeful part. If we can understand how it works, we can learn how to fix it. That's the journey we're taking today, guided by Tim Harford in his book, The Undercover Economist Strikes Back. Harford has sold millions of books because he possesses a rare gift. He can pull back the curtain on the intimidating world of economics and reveal the simple, fascinating stories hiding behind all the jargon and scary-looking charts. His promise is bold. He wants to hand you the user's manual for the economy. By the end of today, you won't just know what words like inflation, stimulus, or GDP mean. You'll understand the human stories behind them. You'll see why economies get sick, and you'll learn about the tools we have to heal them. You'll start seeing the world through an economist's eyes, not as a cold set of numbers, but as a fascinating puzzle about people, choices, and how we can build a better world together. So let's begin. Let's pop the hood on this incredible machine and see what makes it tick. If we're going to understand the economy as a machine, we need a dashboard first. We need to know how fast the engine is running. For most of modern history, economists have relied on one big number: gross domestic product, or GDP. You hear it constantly on the news. GDP is up 2%, or the economy shrank this quarter. All it really means is the total value of everything. All the cars, coffees, haircuts, and Netflix subscriptions produced in a country over a year. The world's GDP sits around $70 trillion. That sounds enormous, but it's just a number. And from the very beginning, even Simon Kuznets, the economist who invented GDP, warned us not to obsess over it. He said the welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measurement of national income, and he was absolutely right. GDP counts the sales of trashy novels, the same as literary classics. It counts the production of weapons right alongside life-saving medicines. It doesn't measure the quality of our friendships, the beauty of a sunset, or a child's laughter. So why do we pay attention to it? Because while GDP isn't everything, it's connected to many things we care deeply about. Think about what happens when that number drops, as Tim Harford points out. We call it a recession, but a recession isn't just a number on a screen. It's millions of people losing their jobs, families struggling to pay bills, and a heavy feeling of fear and uncertainty hanging in the air. Happiness research tells us that unemployment is one of the most crushing experiences a person can face, far worse than just losing income would suggest. Recessions leave lasting scars. Young people who graduate during a downturn can see their earnings damaged for a decade or more. When people feel insecure, societies often become less tolerant, less generous, and less kind. So preventing recessions matters. It matters tremendously. But to prevent them, we need to understand what causes them. Sometimes the cause is obvious: a war, a natural disaster, or a sudden oil price spike. But other times, an economy just seems to get sick for no clear reason. The machine sputters and stalls mysteriously. This brings us to the first great story that illuminates everything. It's not about Wall Street or Washington. It's about a group of parents who just wanted to find babysitters. It was called the Capitol Hill Babysitting Cooperative. About 200 families in Washington, D.C., mostly government workers, created a simple system. Instead of paying cash, they made their own currency called scrip. Each piece was worth half an hour of babysitting. When you joined, you got 40 pieces. Now imagine you're new to this co-op. You receive your 40 pieces of scrip and think, that's only 10 hours of primetime babysitting. Not much. What if we go out this weekend, and then there's an emergency next week, and we don't have enough scrip left? It's reasonable thinking. You decide to be cautious, spend a few evenings babysitting for others first, build up a nice reserve, then start going out. The problem? Everyone was thinking exactly the same thing. Everyone wanted to save their scrip. Nobody felt comfortable spending it. But here's what that means. If nobody goes out, nobody gets the chance to babysit. And if nobody can babysit, nobody can earn more scrip. The co-op fell into a recession. Couples sat at home, miserable and frustrated, wishing they could go out. Plenty of parents were willing to babysit, and plenty wanted a night off. The potential was there, but no transactions were happening. The entire babysitting economy had frozen solid. This little story perfectly captures what economists call a demand-side recession. It's what the great economist John Maynard Keynes was talking about. The problem wasn't a lack of supply. Babysitters were available. The problem was a lack of demand, a lack of spending. The co-op, run mostly by lawyers, tried fixing it with rules. They made a new requirement. Every family had to go out at least twice a year. It didn't work. You can't force people to spend when they're feeling scared and insecure. So what was the solution? Shockingly simple. The organizers printed more money. They gave every family 20 extra pieces of scrip. Just like that, the recession ended. With a bit more currency in their pockets, people felt comfortable going out. That meant more opportunities for others to babysit. The economy started flowing again. The stalled machine was running smoothly once more. This story is incredibly powerful. It suggests that sometimes a huge, painful recession isn't caused by some deep, fundamental problem with society. Sometimes it's just magneto trouble, as Keynes put it, a simple technical glitch. And sometimes the fix can be as straightforward as creating more money. Now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, if it's that easy, why don't we just print money to solve all our problems? Great question, and it brings us to the very nature of money itself. Most of us think of money as wealth, but that's only true for individuals. For society as a whole, money isn't wealth. Wealth is the actual stuff: factories, roads, skills, food, houses. Money is just the lubricant that helps all those things get exchanged. Harford tells a fantastic story about two musicians from a band called the KLF. In 1994, they went to a remote Scottish island with a suitcase containing £1 million in cash. As a piece of performance art, they burned it. All of it. The public was outraged. What a terrible waste. Think of all the good you could have done with that money. But was it really a waste? Think about it. When they burned that pile of paper, did they destroy any houses? Any food? Any cars? No. They destroyed a few $1,000s worth of special paper and ink. In fact, by removing £1 million from the economy, They technically made everyone else who held British pounds just a tiny microscopic bit richer. Prices across the country would, theoretically, fall by an infinitesimal amount to adjust. Money, Harford explains, is a story we all agree to believe in. It doesn't need any intrinsic value. He tells us about the island of Yap in the Pacific, where for centuries the currency was giant stone wheels called rai. Some were bigger than a person and weighed as much as a car, almost impossible to move. So how did they use them as money? They didn't move them at all. If someone wanted to buy something, they would publicly announce that ownership of a particular stone had changed. Everyone knows that stone leaning against my hut now belongs to Tim. The stone never budged. The real currency was the shared memory of the village. One of the most valuable stones on the island had sunk to the ocean floor in a storm generations ago. Nobody had seen it for 100 years, but everyone knew who owned it, and it was still used in transactions. Sounds crazy, right? But is it any crazier than our system? For years, paper money was just a promise, a claim on gold sitting in a vault nobody ever saw. Now it's not even a claim on gold. It's a claim on, well, nothing. It has value only because we all believe it has value. Money has 3 jobs. It's a medium of exchange. It lets a baker buy shoes without finding a shoemaker who wants bread. It's a store of value. You can save it for later. And it's a unit of account. It's the ruler we use to measure everything else's value. When currency works well, it does all 3 jobs. But when a government gets desperate and starts printing too much, things fall apart. This is called hyperinflation. We saw a glimpse of this in the babysitting co-op. After they fixed the recession by printing more scrip, they kept printing. Soon there was too much. Everyone wanted to go out, but nobody wanted to stay in and babysit. The result? Another recession. In the real world, it gets much, much worse. In Zimbabwe in 2008, the government printed so much money that prices doubled every single day. They printed a $100 trillion bill, a 1 with 14 zeros after it. A wheelbarrow full of cash might buy you a loaf of bread. Money stopped being a store of value. Your life savings could become worthless overnight. It stopped being a useful medium of exchange. And it stopped being a unit of account. Nobody knew what anything was really worth anymore. The entire economic machine melts down. The story of how Brazil cured its own terrible hyperinflation in the 1990s is fascinating. Their currency, the cruzeiro, was losing value by the day. So a group of economists came up with a wild idea. They introduced a new, completely imaginary currency, a ghost currency called the URV. Nothing was actually priced in URVs. You couldn't hold one in your hand. But every price tag in every store showed 2 prices. The price in ever-inflating cruzeiros and the price in stable URVs. Your salary was quoted in URVs. A loaf of bread was always 1 URV. That 1 URV might be 1,000 cruzeiros on Monday and 1,200 on Tuesday, but in people's minds, the price was stable. The URV became the new unit of account, the new ruler for value. After a few months, people were so used to thinking in URVs that the government simply abolished the cruzeiro and made the ghost currency real. Just like that, inflation stopped. They'd fixed the machine by changing the story people told themselves about money. This brings us to a crucial question. If printing too little money causes recession and printing too much causes hyperinflation, how much is just right? Most modern central banks, like the Federal Reserve, aim for a little bit of inflation, usually around 2% per year. Why not 0? For one, a little inflation acts as a buffer. If you aim for 0 and miss, you can get deflation, where prices actually fall. That sounds nice, but it's a disaster. If you knew the price of a new TV would be lower next month, you'd wait to buy it. Everyone would. Spending would freeze, and the economy would fall into a trap. But there's a more subtle reason, rooted in human psychology. We hate seeing our wages cut in nominal terms. If your boss told you they were cutting your pay from $20 an hour to $19, you'd be furious. But if they gave you a 2% raise when inflation was at 4%, you'd be getting a real pay cut, but you wouldn't feel nearly as upset. A little inflation greases the wheels of the labor market, allowing these adjustments to happen without causing outrage. So we have one set of tools for fixing the economy: monetary policy. That's all the stuff about printing money, inflation, and interest rates, usually handled by a central bank. But what if that's not enough? What if, like in the 2008 financial crisis, the central bank cuts interest rates all the way to zero, and the economy is still stuck? This is where Keynes comes back in with his most famous and most controversial idea: fiscal stimulus. This is the idea that the government itself should step in and start spending money to boost demand. Keynes once famously wrote that if the government buried old bottles filled with banknotes in abandoned coal mines and let private companies dig them up, it would be better than nothing. The digging would create jobs, the workers would spend their wages, and the economy would get moving again. It sounds absurd, and Keynes knew it. His point was that it would be much better to spend money on something useful, like building roads, bridges, or schools. But even a completely pointless project could, theoretically, help during a deep slump. This brings us to the idea of the, quote, spending multiplier. If the government spends $1 million, does the economy grow by exactly $1 million, more, less? Imagine the government spends $1 million hiring construction workers to fix potholes. The multiplier is at least 1. $1 million is spent, the economy grows by $1 million. But it doesn't stop there. The construction workers take their paychecks and go out for dinner. The restaurant owner uses that income to buy supplies. The supplier uses their income to... You get the idea. The initial spending ripples through the economy. The multiplier could be 1.5, or even 2. $1 million of government spending could create $2 million of economic activity. It's like a free lunch, but, and this is huge, it only works under very specific conditions. It only works when the economy is in a deep slump, like the babysitting co-op. It only works when there are lots of unemployed people and idle factories just waiting to be put to use. If the government tries this when the economy is already running at full capacity, it doesn't work. You just pull workers and resources away from the private sector. The government spends $1 million. The private sector shrinks by $1 million. The multiplier is 0. And all you get is inflation. This is the great debate that erupts after every economic crisis. One side says, we need stimulus. The multiplier is big. The other says, stimulus is wasteful. It just creates debt and inflation. The multiplier is 0. So how do we know who's right? How can we tell if we're in a babysitting recession, where stimulus is the answer, or something else entirely? This brings us to our second great economic parable, the prison camp recession. During World War II, an economist named R.A. Radford was held in a German prisoner of war camp. He noticed something fascinating. A complex economy had sprung up spontaneously. Prisoners received regular parcels from the Red Cross containing chocolate, jam, coffee, and cigarettes. But not everyone valued these things equally. French prisoners were desperate for coffee. The English wanted tea. So a market emerged, with cigarettes as currency. A chocolate bar might cost 2 cigarettes. A can of jam, 4. Middlemen emerged, speaking different languages, connecting buyers and sellers. Prices changed based on supply and demand. When hungry new prisoners arrived, food prices would rise. Then, toward the war's end, the Red Cross parcels stopped coming, the supply of goods dried up. And the prison camp economy fell into deep recession. Trade volume collapsed. But this was a completely different kind of recession from the babysitting co-op. The problem wasn't a lack of demand. Prisoners were as hungry as ever. The problem was a failure of supply. There was simply less stuff to go around. This perfectly illustrates the classical view of economics. In this view, the economy is a well-oiled machine that adapts efficiently to outside shocks. The problem isn't magneto trouble inside the engine. The problem is that the road is bumpy. In this case, No amount of stimulus or money printing inside the camp could have solved anything. The only solution was for the Red Cross parcels to start arriving again. So this is the fundamental dilemma for anyone trying to manage an economy. Are you facing a Keynesian, demand-side problem like the babysitting co-op, or a classical supply-side problem like the prison camp? If it's a babysitting problem, you need to boost demand with stimulus. If it's a prison camp problem, stimulus will only cause inflation, and you need to focus on fixing the underlying supply issues. Economists call the gap between what an economy could produce and what it is producing the output gap. In a babysitting recession, there's a big output gap. In a prison camp recession, there isn't. But how do you measure something that isn't there? It's incredibly difficult, which is why economists argue so fiercely. One of the most important puzzle pieces is unemployment. A sudden spike in unemployment seems like a clear sign of a babysitting-style recession. It suggests people want to work, but can't find jobs because of a lack of demand. But even here, it's not so simple. And this leads us to one of the book's most surprising stories: how Henry Ford, in a sense, invented modern unemployment. In 1914, Henry Ford did something that seemed insane. In the middle of a recession, he announced he was more than doubling wages for his factory workers to $5 a day. Why would he do this? The simple supply and demand model of labor says you should pay the lowest wage you can get away with. And in a recession, you can get away with a lot. Was he just generous? Not really. Ford himself called it one of the finest cost-cutting moves we ever made. How could doubling wages cut costs? The answer was in his turnover rates. In 1913, to maintain a workforce of about 14,000, Ford had to hire over 50,000 men. The average worker only stayed 3 months. The assembly line work was mind-numbingly boring, and the bosses were terrible. Workers would slack off, skip work, or just walk out. The $5 day changed everything. Suddenly, a Ford job was the best job in town. Workers became, as one observer noted, absolutely docile. They showed up on time, worked hard, and didn't cause trouble, because they knew they couldn't find a job that good anywhere else. Productivity soared. Ford was paying more, but getting much more out of his workers. Profits went up. This is what economists call efficiency wages. It's often good business to pay more than the market rate. But think about what this does to the labor market. It creates a division: the lucky insiders with these great jobs, and the outsiders left unemployed, desperate to get in. This kind of unemployment is different. It's not just a temporary feature of a recession. It's structural, built into how the system works. And it tells us that unemployment isn't always just about lack of demand. It's a much more complex human problem. As we near the end of our journey, we can see that the simple metaphor of the economy as a machine starts to get complicated. It's a machine built and operated by flawed, emotional, and often unpredictable human beings. This is why, Harford argues, macroeconomics needs to broaden its horizons. For a long time, the field became very abstract, full of elegant mathematical models that had one big problem: they didn't have any banks in them. Economists just assumed the financial system worked perfectly, connecting savers and borrowers. The 2008 crisis was a brutal reminder that you can't understand the modern economy if you ignore the banks. Macroeconomics has also been slow to incorporate insights from behavioral economics, the study of how real, irrational humans make decisions. We've seen how quirks of our psychology, our sense of fairness, our aversion to nominal pay cuts, are at the heart of why prices get sticky and cause recessions. The future of economics, Harford suggests, lies in being more like Bill Phillips. Phillips was an engineer, a tinkerer, a sociologist, and an economist. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, to borrow ideas from other fields, and to focus on solving real-world problems. He understood that economics isn't just about math, it's about history, psychology, and institutions. He never lost sight of the fact that economics is about people. And perhaps that's the ultimate lesson. We started with the question of how to run, or ruin, an economy. We've looked under the hood at the complex machinery of money, inflation, and growth. We've seen there are no simple, one-size-fits-all answers. The world is a mix of babysitting co-ops and prison camps, of demand failures and supply shocks. But the one thing connecting it all is the human element. The economy isn't a force of nature. It's a system we built. And because we built it, we have the power to change it, to re-engineer it, to make it work better for everyone. It's not an easy task, but as the story of Bill Phillips and his marvelous pink machine reminds us, it's a task worth undertaking. What an incredible journey. When you first pick up a book like The Undercover Economist Strikes Back, the world of macroeconomics can feel like a foreign country where you don't speak the language. But what Tim Harford does so masterfully is act as our translator. He doesn't just define the words. He tells us the stories behind them, and suddenly, everything clicks into place. For me, the most powerful and lasting idea from this book is the simple framing of the two parables, the babysitting recession and the prison camp recession. It's such a brilliant way to cut through all the political noise and technical jargon surrounding economic debates. Almost every argument you hear about the economy, whether we should cut taxes or increase spending, whether we should worry more about unemployment or inflation, is really an argument about which kind of story we're in. Are we facing a problem of not enough spending or not enough stuff? It's a question that clarifies so much. The babysitting co-op story in particular should be required reading for everyone. It shows how a group of perfectly rational, well-meaning people can collectively create a disaster for themselves, and how a simple, technical fix can make everything better. It's a story of hope. It tells us that economic slumps aren't inevitable punishments for our sins. They're often just system failures, and with the right understanding, we can fix them. That brings me to the second big takeaway, the importance of intellectual humility. Harford shows us that economists don't have all the answers. They make mistakes. Their models are imperfect. The story of Harvard professors and their spreadsheet error that influenced global policy is a sobering reminder that we should be skeptical of anyone claiming to have found a simple, ironclad law of economics. The world is too complex for that. The economy isn't a science like physics. It's more like medicine, a blend of science, art, and educated guessing, where the patient is always changing. So how can we apply these ideas in our own lives? First, become a more critical consumer of economic news. Next time you hear a politician or pundit confidently declare what the economy needs, ask yourself, are they assuming we're in the babysitting co-op or the prison camp? Are they talking about a demand problem or a supply problem? Just having that framework in your mind will make you a much smarter citizen. Second, embrace the idea of the seen and the unseen. When you hear a simple solution to a complex problem, always ask, and then what happens? If we cut taxes, who benefits and where does the money come from? If we increase spending, what are the ripple effects? Economics teaches us to think about second and third order consequences, the things that aren't immediately obvious. It's a superpower for clear thinking that applies far beyond just economics. Finally, stay curious. The world is a fascinatingly complex system, and economics is one of the most powerful lenses we have for understanding it. Don't be intimidated by the terminology. At its heart, it's just about people, incentives, and stories. The story of Bill Phillips, the quiet tinkerer who changed the world, is a testament to the power of a curious mind that refuses to stay in its lane. That was a summary of The Undercover Economist Strikes Back by Tim Harford. We've journeyed through the core ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a travel brochure. It can show you the pictures, but it can't give you the feeling of actually being there. The real magic of this book is in Harford's writing, the way he weaves these stories together with wit and clarity. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If any of the stories we've talked about today, the babysitting co-op, the prison camp, the man who built an economy out of water, have sparked your curiosity, then I urge you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning economics. It's about learning a new way to see the world. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know this work is helping you, and it ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.